What if the maps drawn 500 years ago reveal knowledge that should not exist? What if beneath 2 miles of ice lies proof that civilization is far older than we have been told? What if powerful nations discovered something in Antarctica so profound they have spent decades keeping it hidden? Tonight, we journey to Earth's most remote frontier where impossible cartography, aborted military operations, and geometric anomalies pierce through glaciers to whisper of a world we have forgotten. This is a story of catastrophe and concealment, of ancient knowledge encoded in parchment and stone, of expeditions that found more than ice and returned with silence. Welcome to Whispered Empires, where we unravel mysteries history has buried beneath cold and time. If this kind of storytelling helps you find rest, then like the video and subscribe to journey deeper into the unknown. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what hour finds you here as you drift toward these frozen secrets. The ice remembers what we have been taught to forget, and in the chapters ahead we will ask what lies beneath and who does not want us to know. Our story begins not in Antarctica but in an Istanbul archive where a map changes everything. In 1929, a German theologian working in the Topkapi Palace Library in Istanbul discovered a fragment of parchment that should not exist. Drawn on gazelle skin in 1513 by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, the map depicts the Atlantic coastlines of Africa, Europe, and South America with startling accuracy. But it is the southern portion that defies explanation. There, at the bottom edge, drawn with careful detail, is a coastline that matches the northern coast of Antarctica, a continent that would not be officially discovered for another 307 years. The map came with notes written in Turkish by Piri Reis himself, explaining that he had compiled his work from more than 20 source charts, some dating to the time of Alexander the Great, others far older. He claimed Columbus had used similar ancient maps on his voyage west. The implication trembles through the centuries like a vibration in stone. Someone in the distant past had mapped Antarctica, and that knowledge survived in fragments passed through hands and ages until it reached an Ottoman admiral's desk in Constantinople. Modern cartographers examining the Piri Reis map have confirmed something extraordinary. The coastline shown corresponds not to the ice-covered edge visible today, but to the actual bedrock coast buried beneath thousands of feet of glacial ice. This topology was unknown to modern science until 1949, when seismic surveys finally revealed the true shape of the land. How could a map drawn in 1513 show details that required 20th century technology to verify? The coordinates are accurate within degrees, the proportions are correct, the bays and peninsulas align with subglacial features. Either Piri Reis possessed source material from a time when Antarctica was free of ice, or the map represents a coincidence so statistically improbable that it strains belief. The ice remembers what the map reveals. Beneath the weight of ages something waits, and perhaps someone once knew it well enough to draw its shores. Piri Reis was not alone in depicting an impossible Antarctica. In 1531, French cartographer Orontius Phineas produced a world map showing Terra Australis, a southern continent centered almost perfectly on the South Pole. The shape he drew matches Antarctica's actual outline with remarkable fidelity. He depicted mountains where ranges truly exist, now buried beneath ice. He showed rivers that correspond to what glaciologists believe were ancient waterways flowing when the continent was warmer. The Phineas map goes further than Piri Reis. It shows the interior of Antarctica divided by a waterway separating the landmass into two main sections. Modern surveys using ice-penetrating radar have revealed that beneath the ice Antarctica is indeed two large islands connected by land bridges but separated by deep channels. Where did these cartographers obtain their information? Both indicated they worked from older sources, maps preserved in libraries and archives, copied and recopied through generations. The tradition of ancient geography ran through Alexandria, through Islamic centers of learning in Baghdad and Cairo, through Byzantine libraries and medieval monasteries. Knowledge could survive in fragments even when the civilizations that created it had vanished. The Philippe Boich map of 1737 shows Antarctica without any ice at all, depicting it as two separate landmasses. Critics argue that these maps are coincidental, that medieval and Renaissance cartographers made educated guesses that happened to align with reality. But the precision argues against chance. The maps encode knowledge that should not exist unless someone surveyed Antarctica when it was accessible and visible. In 1959, Arlington Mallory, a captain in the United States Navy, worked with cartographic experts from Georgetown University to analyze the Piri Reis map using modern techniques. They concluded that the Antarctic coastline matched Queen Maud Land as it exists beneath the ice. Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene State College spent years studying ancient maps and developed a controversial theory published in his book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings. He proposed that an advanced maritime civilization had mapped the entire world during the last ice age before current ice cap configurations formed. According to Hapgood, this knowledge reached the Library of Alexandria, where it was preserved and copied. When the library burned, fragments survived in the hands of Arab and Byzantine scholars, eventually reaching Renaissance Europe. Mainstream academics challenged Hapgood's conclusions, noting that his interpretations were selective and that simpler explanations existed for most anomalies. The debate continues, but the maps remain stubborn in their precision. When computer analysis was applied to the Piri Reis map, researchers found that South American and African Atlantic coastlines showed accuracy within half a degree of longitude, remarkable for 1513. The Antarctic section remains controversial, but continues to intrigue those who cannot explain how a Renaissance map contains features confirmed only through 20th century seismic technology. The ice remembers what the scholars debate. Somewhere in the cold darkness lie the answers the maps hint toward. The maps are more than historical curiosities. They are challenges to accepted timelines, whispers of capability where we expect only limitation. If ancient civilizations possessed the means and motivation to survey Antarctica before ice covered it, what else did they achieve that has been forgotten? What other knowledge was encoded, preserved, and partially lost as ages turned? Antarctica itself remains silent beneath its burden of ice. The continent holds secrets that 2 miles of glacial weight keep hidden. The maps offer glimpses, but they are only fragments, shadows of a larger picture obscured by time and catastrophe. To understand what they reveal, we must ask not just about cartography, but about climate, about the land itself, about what Antarctica was before the ice came. What did the original mapmakers see when they surveyed those coasts? What did they know that we have forgotten? The answers lie not in libraries, but beneath the ice, waiting in darkness for technology or chance to reveal them. Until then, we have only the maps, impossibly accurate, undeniably old, pointing south toward mysteries that grow deeper the more we examine them. The ice remembers, and so do the maps. What they remember together forms the foundation of our investigation into Antarctica's hidden history. The next chapter takes us beneath the glaciers to explore what the continent was before the freeze, when forests covered valleys and life thrived where now only silence reigns. Antarctica was not always a realm of ice and darkness. Beneath the glaciers that now cover 98% of the continent lies evidence of a radically different world. Geologists extracting core samples from deep within the ice have found pollen from beech trees, fossilized leaves from ferns, and remnants of temperate forests that thrived where only frozen desolation now exists. The rock itself speaks of warmth and life. Coal seams run through Antarctic mountains, black bands of compressed organic matter formed from swamps and forests. Coal requires abundant vegetation growing over long periods in wet, warm conditions. The existence of these deposits proves beyond doubt that Antarctica supported lush ecosystems, jungles dense enough to leave thick layers of carbon that time and pressure transformed into fuel. In the transantarctic mountains, paleontologists have discovered fossils of dinosaurs, including species related to those found in South America and Australia. These finds support the theory of Gondwana, the ancient supercontinent that united southern landmasses before tectonic forces split them apart. 200 million years ago, Antarctica sat at the heart of this vast continent. Its climate mild enough for giant reptiles to thrive under skies we can barely imagine. But we need not reach back to the age of dinosaurs to find habitable Antarctica. More recent geological evidence suggests parts of the continent were ice-free as recently as 6,000 to 15,000 years ago, during and after the last ice age. Sediment cores from the Ross Sea contain layers of marine organisms that lived in open water, not beneath permanent ice shelves. Tree stumps have been found on islands near the Antarctic Peninsula, carbon dated to mere millennia ago, young enough to overlap with human history. The ice remembers when it was not there. The question is what else remembers and what lived during those ice-free windows. Antarctica's climate has oscillated dramatically over geological time. 50 million years ago, during the Eocene epoch, the continent was completely ice-free, covered in forests like those in modern New Zealand or Chile. Temperatures were mild, rain was abundant, and rich biodiversity flourished. Fossil evidence includes palm trees, giant penguins standing 5 feet tall, and early mammals that roamed forests where now only ice exists. The shift to frozen waste was gradual, driven by changes in ocean currents, atmospheric composition, and continental position. Around 34 million years ago, the Drake Passage opened between Antarctica and South America, allowing formation of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This powerful ocean current isolated the continent from warmer northern waters, and Antarctica began to cool. Ice formed first in highlands, then spread across lowlands, eventually encasing the entire landmass in glacial armor. Yet the process was not linear or irreversible. Warm periods interrupted the cooling trend. Ice retreated during interglacial phases when orbital variations brought increased sunlight and higher temperatures. These cycles, driven by Milankovitch variations in Earth's orbit and axial tilt, created windows when parts of Antarctica might have been habitable even in relatively recent times. During the last glacial maximum 20,000 years ago, ice covered far more of Earth than today. But as that ice age ended and global temperatures rose, Antarctica experienced changes as well. Some researchers argue the western Antarctic ice sheet, smaller and less stable than the eastern sheet, could have partially melted, exposing coastal regions to potential human habitation during the warming period between 15,000 and 6,000 years ago. This remains outside mainstream consensus. Most glaciologists maintain Antarctica has been fully glaciated for millions of years, with no significant ice-free periods in recent epochs. If we consider the possibility that Antarctica was partially habitable 12,000 to 6,000 years ago, we must also consider what humanity was capable of during that period. 12,000 years ago corresponds to the end of the Younger Dryas, a climatic upheaval that saw global temperatures change within decades. This era witnessed construction of Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, a megalithic site with massive carved pillars arranged in circles, predating pottery and agriculture. Göbekli Tepe pushes back the timeline for monumental architecture by 6,000 years. Other sites hint at advanced activity in the deep past. Tiwanaku in Bolivia displays precisely cut stone blocks and sophisticated water management systems with construction phases that may extend back 10,000 years or more. The Great Sphinx at Giza shows erosion patterns some geologists interpret as water weathering, requiring rainfall far heavier than Egypt has seen in recorded history, potentially dating the monument to a much wetter climate thousands of years earlier than conventionally accepted. These sites do not prove Antarctic habitation, but they establish that the late Ice Age world was more complex than often portrayed. In 1990, geologists drilling in the Allen Hills of Antarctica discovered sedimentary rocks that could only have formed in liquid water. These rocks contained clay minerals and salt deposits indicating ancient lakes or shallow seas. More recently, ground-penetrating radar has revealed vast subglacial lake systems beneath Antarctic ice. Lake Vostok, the largest, contains more water than Lake Ontario and has been sealed beneath ice for at least 15 million years. But hundreds of other lakes exist, some connected by rivers flowing beneath the glaciers, creating a hidden hydrological network. In 2013, scientists drilling into Lake Willans discovered microbial life thriving in dark, cold water without sunlight. These organisms survive by metabolizing minerals and chemicals, proving life can persist in Antarctica's most extreme environments. The geological record suggests Antarctica's climate has been variable, with windows of relative warmth interrupting longer cold periods. During these windows, parts of the continent may have been not just habitable but inviting, with freshwater sources, moderate temperatures, and ecosystems supporting complex life. The ice remembers these warm interludes even as it buries evidence of what they harbored. The maps suggest someone knew Antarctica's coastline before ice obscured it. Geology confirms such knowledge would have been possible if mapping occurred during reduced glaciation. What we lack is direct physical evidence, artifacts that would prove human habitation beyond doubt. But Antarctica is vast, and 98% remains covered by ice up to 3 miles thick. If evidence exists, it lies buried beneath glacial weight that few can reach. The story of how the continent froze and what that freezing may have destroyed is where our mystery deepens, leading us to examine a catastrophe so violent it left its mark across the entire planet. In Siberian permafrost, scientists have discovered mammoths frozen so rapidly their flesh remains edible thousands of years later, their stomachs filled with undigested grass and flowers. These massive animals, adapted to cold, were caught mid-meal by catastrophe so sudden they had no time to flee or finish swallowing. The vegetation in their stomachs includes species that grow only in temperate climates, suggesting the environment changed with shocking speed from warm to lethally cold in hours or days. This phenomenon is not isolated to 1 or 2 specimens. Thousands of mammoths have been found frozen across Siberia and Alaska, many in poses suggesting instant death. Some stand upright as if they simply stopped walking. Others are on their knees as though they collapsed where they stood. The evidence points to a climate event of staggering violence and speed, something beyond gradual cooling or seasonal change. Could similar catastrophe have struck Antarctica? The geological record suggests it might have. Ice core samples from Antarctic glaciers show layers of ash, dust, and isotopic anomalies corresponding to rapid climate shifts. Around 12,800 years ago, during the period known as the Younger Dryas, global temperatures plummeted suddenly after a warming trend. This cold snap lasted more than 1,000 years before temperatures rose again. What could cause such dramatic, rapid change? Scientists have proposed various mechanisms, but one theory has gained support in recent decades: an extraterrestrial impact. Evidence from sediment layers worldwide shows elevated concentrations of platinum, nanodiamonds, and spherules consistent with asteroid or comet strike. The impact may not have been a single large object, but a fragmented swarm, pieces of disintegrating comet hitting Earth in multiple locations. The ice remembers violence. What it remembers matches the flash-frozen evidence found in permafrost, in sediment, in the sudden appearance of extinction markers across geological strata. Something came from the sky and changed everything. The Younger Dryas is named after Dryas octopetala, a flower that thrives in cold climates. Its pollen appears suddenly in sediment layers from this era, replacing pollen from temperate species. This event interrupts the otherwise steady warming following the last glacial maximum, and its abruptness has puzzled scientists for decades. Traditional explanations centered on ocean circulation changes. The theory held that as glaciers melted, massive freshwater influx into the North Atlantic disrupted the Gulf Stream and other currents transporting warm water northward. Without this heat, distribution temperatures dropped and ice expanded again. This explanation accounts for Northern Hemisphere cooling but struggles to explain the global scope of Younger Dryas effects. The impact hypothesis offers more comprehensive explanation. Proponents point to a sediment layer found at sites across North America, Europe, and Asia dated precisely to Younger Dryas onset. This layer contains materials associated with high-energy impacts including shocked quartz, magnetic spherules, carbon spherules indicating intense fires, and concentrations of iridium and platinum rare in Earth's crust but common in asteroids and comets. In 2007, researcher Richard Firestone and colleagues published evidence of this impact layer in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. They argued a comet exploded over North America, possibly over the Canadian ice sheet. The explosion would have equaled thousands of nuclear bombs, instantly melting vast ice quantities, triggering tsunamis, igniting continent-wide fires, and throwing enough debris into the atmosphere to block sunlight for years. The hypothesis remains controversial. Critics note that not all sites show expected impact markers and some evidence has been challenged. But supporting data continues accumulating, including discovery of a possible impact crater beneath Greenland ice announced in 2018. If comets struck Earth 12,800 years ago, effects would have been global and devastating. Temperatures would have dropped rapidly as atmospheric dust blocked sunlight. Ecosystems would have collapsed as plants died and food chains broke. Ice sheets which had been retreating would have surged forward again, reclaiming land briefly freed from glacial grip. In Antarctica, consequences could have been especially severe. The continent sits at the pole where even small temperature reductions trigger runaway ice formation. If climate had briefly warmed enough to expose coastal regions, the sudden return to deep cold would have been catastrophic. Any ecosystems established would have been annihilated. Any human settlements, if they existed, would have faced impossible choice between flight and death. Evidence of flash freezing extends beyond Siberia. In Antarctica, scientists have found frozen seals miles inland from coast, far from any open water. These seals are mummified by dry cold, preserved in poses suggesting they wandered inland and froze where they stood. Frozen plant material appears in Antarctic ice cores, including pollen and leaf fragments from species unable to survive modern Antarctic conditions. These plants would have required temperatures 20 to 30 degrees warmer than present. Their appearance in ice layers dated to late Ice Age suggests Antarctica experienced brief warming followed by catastrophic refreeze. Some researchers speculate the entire continent could have been engulfed in years, possibly months, if climate shift was violent enough. The mechanics of such rapid freeze are not fully understood, but physical evidence suggests it happened. Beyond scientific data, myths and legends worldwide may preserve memories of global catastrophe. Cultures separated by oceans and millennia tell stories of great floods, of skies that darkened, of winters that would not end. Plato's account of Atlantis describes powerful civilization destroyed in single day and night of earthquakes and floods. He claimed Egyptian priests told him the story, placing the event 9,000 years before his time, around 11,600 years ago, remarkably close to Younger Dryas dating. Indigenous Australian traditions speak of time when world was drowned. In South America, legends tell of Viracocha, a figure who came from the sea after great flood, teaching agriculture and building arts to survivors. These connections are speculative, built on myth fragments and tentative text interpretation. But the global distribution of flood myths, their consistent themes of sudden destruction and survival, and approximate correspondence to Ice Age ends suggest something real lies behind the stories. The catastrophe ending the last ice age represents one of the most dramatic climate events in human history. If Antarctica was inhabited, any settlements would have faced climatic apocalypse. The ice remembers the violence, and perhaps it also remembers what the violence destroyed. Long before European explorers charted Antarctic wastes, stories circulated of a great southern land. Ancient Greeks called it Terra Australis Incognita, the unknown southern land, and believed it must exist to balance northern hemisphere landmasses. This was not mere speculation but logical deduction based on spherical Earth understanding and perceived need for symmetry. Ptolemy, the Greco-Egyptian geographer whose work influenced cartography for more than 1,000 years, included massive southern continent on his maps. He depicted it connecting to Africa and extending far east. But there are older references more enigmatic and harder to trace. In Hindu cosmology texts describe 7 continents surrounded by oceans with southernmost lands inhabited by advanced beings possessing great knowledge. The Puranas, ancient Sanskrit texts, speak of cycles of creation and destruction, of civilizations that rose and fell in ages before recorded history, of landmasses that sank beneath waves or were buried under ice. Aboriginal Australians, whose oral traditions represent among the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, tell stories of ancestral beings who traveled across southern seas. Could these myths reflect real knowledge of southern continent, knowledge predating modern discovery? The ice remembers what the legends hint toward, but translating memory into proof requires more than stories. Plato's Timaeus and Critias dialogues describe Atlantis, an advanced island civilization that vanished beneath the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. According to Plato, Egyptian priests at Sais told the story to Solon, placing Atlantis's destruction 9,000 years before their conversation. If we take that timeline seriously, it places the event around 11,600 years ago. Plato describes Atlantis as possessing advanced technology, sophisticated architecture, and a powerful navy that controlled territories across the Mediterranean and beyond. The civilization fell to hubris and was destroyed by earthquakes and floods, sinking beneath the waves. Most scholars interpret this as philosophical allegory, a cautionary tale about civilization and excess rather than historical account. Yet some researchers have wondered if the story preserves distorted memory of real place and real disaster. If a civilization existed during the late Ice Age and was destroyed by climate catastrophe, could fragments of that memory have reached Egyptian priests? The Timaeus mentions that Atlantis lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, meaning west of Gibraltar in the Atlantic. But ancient geography was imprecise, and directions in myth often function symbolically rather than literally. Some interpretations place Atlantis in the Mediterranean, others in the Caribbean or mid-Atlantic. A few bold voices have suggested Antarctica itself, arguing that the frozen continent fits the role of lost land better than any island. This remains highly speculative and outside academic mainstream. But the coincidence of timing between Plato's flood date and the Younger Dryas creates a pattern worth examining. Polynesian navigation traditions speak of lands to the far south, of islands and continents that no longer exist or are no longer reachable. The Maori of New Zealand tell of Te aka Maui, the great fish that became the North Island, and of voyages their ancestors made to the edge of the known world. Some of their star navigation techniques point toward Antarctic waters, suggesting their seafaring ancestors may have ventured into far southern latitudes. Polynesian navigators could sail thousands of miles of open ocean using stars, currents, wave patterns, and bird behavior. The question is whether any of these traditions preserve memories not just of approaching Antarctica but of a time when it was habitable, when people lived there before the ice returned. In South America, the Inca spoke of Viracocha, sometimes called Kontiki, a bearded teacher who arrived from across the sea bringing knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, and architecture. He was associated with water and the ocean, and legend said he appeared after a great flood that destroyed the previous world. The Inca built their empire on foundations laid by earlier cultures, including Tiwanaku near Lake Titicaca. Tiwanaku's origins remain debated. Some archaeologists date major construction phases to around 500 AD, but acknowledge that the site may have much older foundations. The precision of stonework at Tiwanaku rivals that of later Inca construction, and some blocks weigh over 100 tons. The methods used to quarry, transport, and fit these stones remain subjects of speculation. Local legends claim the city was built by giants or gods in a single night, a mythological claim that nonetheless speaks to the awe later peoples felt confronting architecture they could not explain. Could refugees from Antarctica have carried building knowledge north, establishing centers like Tiwanaku? The connection is speculative, but the pattern of megalithic construction across ancient world raises questions. Sumerian texts from Mesopotamia, among the oldest written records we possess, mention beings called the Anunnaki who came from the south bringing knowledge and establishing civilization. The Sumerians at cities like Eridu and Nippur developed writing, mathematics, and urban planning seemingly quite suddenly around 5,000 years ago. Their own texts claim their knowledge came from elsewhere. Were these teachers refugees from a destroyed Antarctic civilization? Or do the texts record something else entirely? The Anunnaki are described in various texts as coming from distant lands, teaching arts of civilization to early humanity. Some interpret these as mythological beings, others as memories of actual historical contact with advanced peoples. The patterns are suggestive but not conclusive. Myths from disparate cultures share themes of southern lands, advanced ancestors, catastrophic floods, and teachers who came from the sea. These could be independent developments, universal human responses to natural disasters. Or they could preserve fragmented memories of real events, real places, real people. The ice remembers, but it does not speak clearly. The legends whisper, but their words have been distorted by time. What we can say is that humanity's oral traditions point consistently toward forgotten ages and lost lands. Whether Antarctica was one of those lands remains an open question, one that later expeditions would pursue with startling intensity. The myths and the maps tell similar stories from different angles. One speaks in lines and coastlines, the other in flood narratives and teacher gods. Together they suggest that Antarctica's history might be far stranger than the simple tale of eternal ice that modern science once assumed. What drew explorers south in the 20th century? What were they searching for in the frozen wastes? The next chapters trace expeditions that ventured into Antarctic darkness, perhaps seeking to verify what maps and legends had long suggested. The ice remembers what those expeditions found, but official records tell only part of the story. The silence around certain discoveries speaks louder than any published report, suggesting that some secrets are deemed too dangerous to share. In December 1938, a German expedition departed Hamburg bound for Antarctica. The stated mission was to establish territorial claims and scout locations for a whaling station. But the resources committed suggest objectives far beyond commercial interests. The expedition included the aircraft carrier Schwabenland, 2 seaplanes, numerous scientists, and crew members with specialized skills. Over the following weeks, they would survey more than 600,000 square kilometers of Antarctic territory, dropping thousands of metal swastika markers to claim the land they named New Swabia. The expedition's leader, Captain Alfred Richer, conducted extensive aerial photography and magnetic surveys. The planes flew systematic grid patterns over interior regions, photographing mountain ranges, valleys, and coastal features. Some of these photographs revealed ice-free areas, exposed rock formations, and what appeared to be warm water lakes fed by geothermal heat. The expedition's reports upon return to Germany were classified, and much of the photographic record was lost or destroyed during the war. What remains are fragments, tantalizing hints of discoveries that were deemed too sensitive for public knowledge. Why did Nazi Germany invest such resources in Antarctica when war was imminent and focus should have been on European conflict? The official explanation emphasizes strategic interests. Germany relied heavily on whale oil for margarine production and industrial lubricants, and Antarctic waters were prime whaling grounds. Establishing a base would secure access to these resources and potentially provide a foothold in the Southern Hemisphere. But this explanation feels incomplete given the scale and secrecy of the operation. The expedition's timing is curious, suggesting priorities beyond mere resource acquisition. Alternative theories abound, many speculative but persistent in historical discourse. Some researchers suggest the Nazis were searching for ancient artifacts or lost technology. The Nazi leadership, particularly Heinrich Himmler and the SS, had deep interests in occult matters, ancient civilizations, and Aryan origin myths. They funded expeditions to Tibet, archaeological digs across Europe, and research into alternative histories. Could Antarctica have been another target in this search for ancestral knowledge or powerful relics? The Nazi quest for ancient artifacts and esoteric knowledge is well documented. Other theories propose the Nazis discovered evidence of ancient structures beneath the ice, possibly the remains of an advanced civilization. The aerial photographs taken during the expedition reportedly showed geometric formations and anomalies that natural geology could not easily explain. If such discoveries were made, they would align with Nazi ideological claims about Aryan supremacy and ancient advanced races. The propaganda value alone would be significant, not to mention any practical knowledge that might be extracted from such finds. The Nazis sought the spear of destiny, searched for the Holy Grail, funded research into Thule. There are also persistent stories, treated as fringe theories by mainstream historians, that the Nazis established a secret base in Antarctica during or after the war. These accounts suggest that U-boats transported personnel, equipment, and possibly even high-ranking officials to Antarctic installations in the final days of the Third Reich. The idea is that a remnant of the Nazi regime survived in hidden underground facilities warmed by geothermal heat, continuing research and development in isolation. No credible evidence supports these claims, and they remain firmly in the realm of speculation. However, the fact that U-boats did operate in southern waters is documented, and some submarines disappeared without confirmed destruction. What we know for certain is that Nazi Germany mounted a significant Antarctic expedition in 1938, conducted extensive surveys, and claimed a large territory. We know the expedition's findings were classified and that much documentation was lost. We know the Nazi leadership had demonstrated interests in ancient civilizations and unconventional historical theories. Beyond these facts, interpretation becomes murky. The ice remembers what the Germans saw. The mystery deepens when we consider what happened next. Just 8 years after the Nazi expedition, the United States would launch its own Antarctic operation, far larger and more militarized than anything that had come before. Operation Highjump would involve thousands of men, extensive naval resources, and a sense of urgency that suggested more than scientific curiosity was at stake. Were the Americans responding to intelligence about Nazi discoveries? Were they searching for the same things the Germans had sought? Documents from the period remain partially classified. Intelligence files about Nazi Antarctic activities were marked sensitive, and some have never been fully released. The secrecy persists decades after the war ended, long past any reasonable security concern about Nazi resurgence. What did the 1938 expedition find that warranted such classification? What intelligence prompted the American response? The ice holds answers, but powerful forces have worked to keep those answers buried beneath secrecy and cold. The Nazi obsession with Antarctica may have been driven by strategic resource concerns, or it may have been motivated by something far stranger. The expedition's true objectives remain murky, obscured by wartime destruction of records and post-war classification. What we can say with certainty is that something in Antarctica drew Nazi attention at a time when Germany's focus should have been entirely on preparing for European conflict. That something was important enough to justify significant resource investment. Whether it was whales, ancient ruins, or something else entirely, the answer lies buried in archives and ice. The expedition members who survived the war and spoke publicly in later years offered little clarity. Some described routine surveying operations and resource assessment. Others hinted at discoveries they were forbidden to discuss, at photographs showing anomalies that defied explanation, at orders from Berlin demanding specific searches in specific locations. These testimonies are fragmentary and often secondhand, passed through researchers and writers who may have embellished or misunderstood. Separating fact from speculation becomes nearly impossible when primary sources have been destroyed or classified. What remains is a pattern of secrecy, of hints and implications, of resources invested and results concealed. The Nazi expedition to Antarctica stands as one of history's enigmatic episodes, a convergence of documented fact and persistent mystery. The official narrative of whaling interests and territorial claims feels insufficient given the context and execution. The alternative narratives of ancient artifact searches and hidden base construction feel sensational yet stubbornly persistent. The truth likely lies between, perhaps more mundane than conspiracy theories suggest yet more interesting than official accounts admit. What we know is that the Nazis went to Antarctica, surveyed extensively, found something worth classifying, and prompted an American response of unprecedented scale. The ice remembers what they discovered, and the next chapter explores that American response and the mysteries it generated. In August 1946, less than a year after World War II ended, the United States Navy launched Operation Highjump, the largest Antarctic expedition in history. The official mission was to establish research bases, test equipment in cold weather, and train personnel in polar operations. But the scale of the operation suggested something beyond routine training. The expedition included 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. Leading the operation was Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, America's most famous polar explorer, a man who had flown over both poles and conducted multiple Antarctic expeditions. Operation Highjump was planned to last 6 to 8 months. The fleet would establish Little America 4 base on the Ross Ice Shelf and conduct extensive mapping and surveying operations across the continent. Aircraft would fly reconnaissance missions, taking photographs and gathering magnetic data. Ground teams would test vehicles and equipment in extreme conditions. On paper, it was a comprehensive scientific and military exercise, ambitious but straightforward. In reality, the operation would be cut short after just 8 weeks, ending abruptly with the fleet returning to the United States months ahead of schedule. What happened during those 8 weeks? Official reports describe successful mapping operations, valuable data collection, and the loss of several aircraft to accidents in difficult conditions. 3 men died when their seaplane crashed into a mountain during a blizzard. Equipment failures plagued some operations. The extreme environment tested men and machines to their limits. By February 1947, Admiral Byrd ordered the fleet home, citing equipment losses and the approaching Antarctic winter as reasons for early termination. The Navy declared the operation a success despite its abbreviated duration. But there are details that trouble researchers looking closely at Operation Highjump. Admiral Byrd gave interviews upon his return that included cryptic statements. He spoke of encountering a new enemy, of technology that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. He suggested that future threats to America might come from the polar regions, that there were hostile forces with capabilities beyond current understanding. These statements, reported in Chilean and other South American newspapers, created a stir and fueled speculation that Byrd had encountered something unexpected in Antarctica. The loss of aircraft during the operation is documented, but details remain vague. Official reports attribute crashes to weather and mechanical failure, standard risks in Antarctic operations. However, some accounts suggest aircraft went missing under circumstances that were not fully explained, that radio communications indicated encounters with unidentified craft or phenomena before contact was lost. These accounts are difficult to verify, based on secondhand testimony and fragmentary records, but they persist in the historical discourse around Operation Highjump. The pattern of incomplete information raises more questions than it answers. There are also questions about the operation's true objectives. Why send such a massive force so soon after the war when military resources were stretched thin and budgets were tight? The Navy had more pressing concerns than Antarctic exploration. Some researchers suggest Operation Highjump was at least partially a military operation, possibly searching for Nazi remnants or investigating discoveries the Germans had made during their 1938 expedition. The timing supports this theory. German U-boats had been active in southern waters during the war, and rumors circulated about secret bases and technology transfers. Another theory holds that Operation Highjump was investigating pre-existing anomalies, perhaps structures or magnetic signatures detected during earlier expeditions or through reconnaissance. The extensive aerial photography and magnetic surveys conducted during Highjump could have been targeting specific locations, searching for evidence of something beneath the ice. If such evidence was found, it would explain the operation's abrupt termination and the subsequent classification of much of the data collected. The ice remembers what Highjump found, but those memories are locked beneath layers of secrecy. Admiral Byrd would return to Antarctica in later years, but Operation Highjump remained his most controversial expedition. The official narrative emphasizes scientific achievement and cold weather training. The alternative narratives suggest encounters with unknown forces, discoveries that challenged understanding, and secrets that required concealment. The truth likely lies somewhere between, obscured by classification, lost records, and the passage of time. What we know is that the operation ended suddenly, that Admiral Byrd made unusual statements, and that many records remain classified or inaccessible decades later. Personnel who participated in Operation Highjump have over the years offered conflicting accounts. Most describe routine operations in challenging conditions. A few have hinted at experiences they cannot fully explain or discuss. One aviator spoke decades later of instruments malfunctioning near certain coastal areas, of compasses spinning wildly, of radio interference that defied technical explanation. Another mentioned restricted zones within the operational area, places aircraft were ordered to avoid without explanation. These testimonies are anecdotal and unverified, but they add to the pattern of anomaly and secrecy. The volume of photography and data collected during Operation Highjump was substantial. Thousands of aerial photographs were taken, documenting vast stretches of previously unmapped terrain. Much of this material was classified and remains unavailable to researchers. The photographs that have been released show mountains, glaciers, and coastal features, all apparently routine. But researchers who have examined available materials note gaps in coverage, areas where photographic records seem incomplete or missing. Were these gaps due to technical failures, or were certain discoveries removed from the public record? The abrupt termination of Operation Highjump has never been satisfactorily explained. Official reasons cite equipment losses and approaching winter, but these were known risks from the outset. The operation was planned with such contingencies in mind. Why would Admiral Byrd, an experienced polar explorer, suddenly decide conditions were too dangerous when the season was still operationally viable? Some researchers suggest the termination was ordered from Washington, that discoveries or encounters during the expedition prompted a strategic decision to withdraw and reassess. This would explain Byrd's cryptic statements about new enemies. Operation Highjump represents a pivotal moment in Antarctic exploration, a massive commitment of resources that ended mysteriously and spawned decades of speculation. The official records tell one story of scientific exploration and military training. The gaps, classifications, and testimonies suggest another story of unexpected discoveries and encounters that authorities chose to conceal. The ice remembers what happened during those 8 weeks in 1946 and 1947. Whether those memories will ever be fully revealed depends on decisions made in classified archives far from the frozen continent. Until then, Operation Highjump remains one of Antarctica's enduring mysteries, prompting us to ask what Admiral Byrd really saw and what truths remain hidden in official silence. Among the most controversial documents associated with Antarctica is a diary allegedly kept by Admiral Richard E. Byrd during a flight on February 19, 1947, during Operation Highjump. The diary describes an extraordinary journey beyond the South Pole into a land of green valleys, warm rivers, and ancient structures. According to this account, Byrd encountered an advanced underground civilization whose representatives warned him about humanity's use of atomic weapons and urged a message of peace be carried back to the surface world. The diary first appeared publicly in the 1990s, decades after Byrd's death in 1957. Its authenticity is fiercely disputed. No original manuscript has been verified. The document's provenance is unclear, and many historians dismiss it as an elaborate hoax created to exploit interest in Antarctic mysteries and hollow Earth theories. The writing style and details contain anachronisms and inconsistencies that cast doubt on its legitimacy. Mainstream scholarship does not accept the diary as authentic. Yet the document has had significant cultural impact, fueling speculation and becoming central to alternative theories about Antarctica. Whether authentic or fabricated, the diary deserves examination for what it reveals about persistent fascination with hidden worlds. The text describes Byrd's plane flying over the pole when instruments began malfunctioning. The ice below gave way to land free of snow, with mountains, forests, and what appeared to be rivers. The temperature rose dramatically despite the polar location. Byrd reported seeing animals resembling mammoths grazing in valleys that should not exist. According to the diary, disc-shaped craft appeared and guided Byrd's plane to a landing area. Beings described as tall and Nordic in appearance greeted him. They spoke in English and identified themselves as inhabitants of an inner world. These beings expressed concern about humanity's nuclear testing, warning that atomic weapons threatened the planet's stability. They claimed previous attempts to communicate with surface governments had been ignored or suppressed. The diary describes crystalline cities powered by technologies Byrd could not comprehend, gardens illuminated by an artificial sun, and archives containing the history of human civilizations spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The beings told Byrd that his testimony would not be believed, that powerful forces would work to discredit him, but that he must deliver their warning nonetheless. If we treat this diary as fiction, what does it tell us? It reflects Cold War anxieties about nuclear weapons, drawing on real concerns about atmospheric testing and radioactive fallout. It incorporates hollow Earth theories that date back centuries, blending them with UFO phenomena that became prominent in the late 1940s. The Nordic beings echo Aryan mythology that the Nazis exploited, recast here in a benevolent rather than supremacist light. The diary synthesizes multiple mythological and speculative traditions into a narrative that resonates with those seeking alternatives to conventional history. But what if some element of the diary reflects real experience, even if distorted or embellished? Admiral Byrd did fly missions during Operation Highjump. He did make cryptic public statements about new enemies and polar threats. The diary's publication decades after his death could represent a genuine attempt by family or associates to release information they believed was true, even if the document itself was reconstructed from memory or fragmentary notes. The core claim, that Antarctica contains secrets beyond public knowledge, aligns with other evidence we have examined throughout this investigation. The beings in the diary speak of catastrophes that drove their civilization underground. This echoes the Younger Dryas impact theory, the flash freeze evidence, and the geological record of rapid climate change. Could survivors of a surface civilization have found refuge in geothermal caverns beneath Antarctica? Modern science confirms vast subglacial lake systems and volcanic activity that could theoretically support ecosystems. The diary's description of warm valleys and rivers matches what thermal imaging and ground-penetrating radar have revealed about Antarctica's hidden hydrology beneath the ice. The diary also mentions ancient structures and archives. This resonates with other claims about pyramid-shaped formations visible in satellite imagery and magnetic anomalies suggesting metallic constructions beneath ice. If these features are real and artificial, they would require explanation. The diary offers one, however fantastical. Whether we accept that explanation or seek others, the underlying question remains. What structures exist beneath Antarctic ice, and who built them? The warning about nuclear weapons in the diary takes on interesting context when we consider subsequent Antarctic developments. Nuclear testing was proposed for Antarctic regions in the late 1950s. The Antarctic Treaty of 1961 specifically banned nuclear explosions and radioactive waste disposal on the continent. Was this treaty simply prudent environmental protection, or did it reflect deeper concerns about Antarctica's sensitivity to such activities? The diary suggests the latter, though proving causation is impossible. Critics of the diary point to numerous problems. The language feels modern rather than 1940s military style. Details about technology and geography do not always align with what Byrd would have known. The narrative structure is too neat, too literary for a field journal. These are valid objections that support the hoax hypothesis. Yet hoaxes often contain grains of truth, and even fabrications can point toward real mysteries they attempt to explain. The ice remembers whether Byrd flew into hidden valleys or not. What matters is that the diary, authentic or not, has become part of Antarctica's mythology. It shapes how people think about the frozen continent, adding layers of mystery to an already enigmatic place. It asks us to consider whether official narratives tell complete stories or whether gaps exist, deliberately maintained, where uncomfortable truths have been buried. The diary may be fiction, but the questions it raises about secrecy, discovery, and suppression demand serious consideration regardless of the document's authenticity. The persistence of the Byrd diary in popular consciousness suggests it fulfills a need, provides an explanation for anomalies that official accounts ignore. Whether the diary describes real events or imaginative speculation, it points toward genuine mysteries that exist independent of this controversial text. The abrupt end of Operation Highjump, the cryptic statements Byrd made publicly, the classification of expedition data, the persistent rumors of discoveries and encounters. These facts exist whether or not the diary is authentic. What did Byrd experience in Antarctica? What did Operation Highjump discover? Why the secrecy? The ice holds answers. The diary, authentic or fabricated, reminds us that those answers remain hidden, waiting in the cold darkness. Perhaps the most important function of the diary is not as historical record, but as catalyst for questions, prompting us to look beyond official narratives and ask what truths might be concealed beneath layers of classification and time. In 2016, images circulated online showing 3 pyramid-shaped peaks jutting through Antarctic ice in the Ellsworth Mountains. The photographs, sourced from Google Earth and various satellite mapping programs, revealed formations with geometric precision that seemed difficult to attribute to natural erosion alone. The peaks displayed roughly symmetrical faces, consistent angles, and orientations that suggested intentional construction rather than random geological processes. The images sparked intense debate about whether Antarctica might harbor ancient artificial structures. The discovery or rediscovery prompted immediate responses from both skeptics and researchers seeking answers. Mainstream geologists quickly offered explanations. Mountains can form pyramid shapes through natural processes. When peaks erode uniformly from multiple directions, they can develop geometrically regular forms. The Matterhorn in Switzerland is often cited as an example of a naturally pyramid-shaped mountain. Given Antarctica's extreme conditions and the sculpting power of glacial movement, pyramid-shaped peaks are geologically plausible without requiring human intervention. Wind, ice, and gravity can carve rock into shapes that appear artificial to observers predisposed to see patterns where none exist. Yet, the Antarctic formations prompted closer examination because of their context. Unlike the Matterhorn, which stands in a well-studied region with understood geological history, these Antarctic peaks exist in one of Earth's least explored areas. Their precise measurements and proportions have not been thoroughly documented. Ground expeditions to examine the structures up close have not occurred, at least not in any publicly acknowledged capacity. Without direct study, definitive conclusions about their origin remain elusive. The debate rests on satellite imagery alone, insufficient for final determination. The peaks are not Antarctica's only geometric anomalies. Satellite imagery has revealed other formations that challenge easy explanation. Linear features too straight to be natural drainage patterns. Circular formations suggesting buried structures. Rectangular shapes visible in radar imagery of subglacial topography. Some of these can be explained as artifacts of imaging technology, as compression errors, or as misinterpretation of natural features. Others resist simple categorization and invite further investigation that rarely comes. The ice remembers what lies beneath, but technology provides only glimpses. Comparing Antarctic anomalies to known pyramid sites worldwide reveals interesting patterns. The Great Pyramid of Giza, pyramids in Mexico and Central America, structures in Bosnia and China all share similar construction principles. They use large stone blocks fitted precisely. They align with cardinal directions and astronomical phenomena. They incorporate advanced engineering that challenges assumptions about ancient capabilities. If artificial pyramids exist in Antarctica, they would fit a global pattern of megalithic construction whose origins and purposes remain debated even for well-studied sites. The timing question is crucial. When could Antarctic pyramids have been built? If we accept mainstream chronology placing full glaciation millions of years ago, then artificial structures are impossible unless they were built by non-human intelligence or by civilizations so ancient they predate accepted human evolutionary timelines. But if we consider the minority geological view that parts of Antarctica were ice-free until 6,000 to 12,000 years ago, then human construction becomes chronologically possible, if still technologically challenging for peoples we usually consider primitive. The Piri Reis and Orontius Phineas maps gain new relevance here. If those maps show Antarctic coastlines from a time before current ice coverage, and if that same period allowed human presence, then the pyramid structures could be remnants of that presence. The maps would be documentation and the pyramids would be physical evidence of the same lost civilization. This synthesis of cartographic and structural anomalies creates a more compelling case than either element alone. Together they suggest a pattern of ancient knowledge and construction that conventional history struggles to explain. Why has mainstream archaeology largely ignored Antarctic anomalies? The practical answer involves access and priorities. Antarctica is expensive and dangerous to explore. Archaeological resources are limited and typically directed toward regions where human presence is already established. Without strong evidence demanding investigation, Antarctic pyramid theories remain low priority for academic institutions. The risk of investing time and money chasing misidentified natural features outweighs potential rewards. Careers are built on successful discoveries, not expensive wild goose chases to the most remote continent. But there may be other factors. If structures in Antarctica prove to be artificial and ancient, they would disrupt established historical narratives. They would require explaining how advanced building capabilities existed thousands of years earlier than conventional timelines suggest. They would demand rewriting textbooks and reconsidering human origins. Academic institutions resist such disruptions, sometimes for good reason when evidence is weak, sometimes because paradigm shifts threaten careers and reputations built on existing frameworks. The ice remembers, but institutional inertia prevents investigation. The pyramids also raise questions about knowledge suppression. If expeditions like Operation Highjump or subsequent research missions discovered artificial structures, would that information be made public? Military and intelligence agencies might classify such discoveries as strategic assets. Private corporations or elite groups might seek to control access to ancient technology or knowledge. The Antarctic Treaty restricts activities on the continent, ostensibly for environmental protection, but perhaps also to limit independent investigation of sensitive areas. Control of information means control of narratives. Ground-penetrating radar and other remote sensing technologies have mapped much of Antarctica's subglacial topography. These surveys have identified numerous anomalies, including formations that do not fit expected geological patterns. Some appear to be large geometric structures buried beneath ice. The data from these surveys is not always publicly released in full detail. Researchers sometimes note interesting features in academic papers but stop short of speculating about artificial origins. The ice remembers what lies beneath, and technology can reveal those memories. But whether those revelations reach public awareness depends on choices made by those controlling information. The pyramid anomalies remain unresolved. They could be natural formations misidentified by observers predisposed to see patterns. They could be imaging artifacts with no physical reality. Or they could be genuine artificial structures, evidence of human or other intelligent presence in Antarctica during a forgotten age. Until proper investigation occurs, until geologists and archaeologists examine the sites directly, the mystery persists. The ice holds the truth, but accessing that truth requires will, resources, and permission that have not yet aligned. The next chapter takes us deeper beneath the ice to explore what ground-penetrating radar and magnetic surveys have revealed about Antarctica's hidden depths. Beneath Antarctica's ice lies a hidden world that modern technology has only begun to reveal. Ground-penetrating radar has mapped vast subglacial lake systems, mountain ranges buried under miles of ice, and topographical features that raise as many questions as they answer. Lake Vostok, discovered in the 1970s and confirmed in the 1990s, is the largest of these hidden lakes. It contains more fresh water than Lake Ontario, sealed beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, isolated from the surface for at least 15 million years according to mainstream estimates. The lake represents an entire sealed ecosystem. Russian researchers drilled toward Lake Vostok for decades, seeking to penetrate the ice and sample the water below. The project faced numerous technical challenges. Drilling through ice at such depths requires specialized equipment. Contamination risks are severe. If surface microbes enter the pristine lake, they could destroy unique ecosystems that evolved in isolation. Despite these concerns, drilling continued until February 2012, when Russian teams finally penetrated the ice and reached the lake's surface. Initial samples were taken, analyzed, and found to contain microbial life forms unlike anything previously cataloged. But then something strange happened. Russian authorities announced a halt to drilling operations. Official explanations cited technical problems and the need for more careful contamination protocols. Equipment was withdrawn and the borehole was allowed to freeze over. Some researchers reported that instruments detected magnetic anomalies near the lake, readings suggesting large metallic objects or structures beneath the water. These reports were unofficial, spread through conferences and informal communications rather than peer-reviewed publications. Subsequent Russian statements downplayed any unusual findings, maintaining focus on biological discoveries. What did the Russians find in or near Lake Vostok? The official silence has fueled speculation. Some theories suggest the lake harbors unknown life forms, possibly dangerous, or simply too scientifically valuable to risk contaminating. Others propose that sonar or magnetic surveys detected artificial structures on the lake bed, remnants of ancient construction now submerged beneath ice and water. The most exotic theories claim the Russians discovered a crashed extraterrestrial craft or evidence of non-human intelligence. Without transparent data release, speculation fills the void left by official secrecy. Lake Vostok is not the only subglacial feature raising questions. Antarctica contains more than 400 known subglacial lakes, many unexplored. Some show unusual thermal signatures suggesting geothermal heating far stronger than volcanic activity alone would explain. Could artificial heat sources exist beneath the ice, installations, or reactors from an advanced civilization? Or do these thermal anomalies have conventional geological explanations involving magma chambers and tectonic activity that happens to manifest in unusual patterns? The ice remembers but does not reveal its secrets easily. Magnetic surveys of Antarctica have identified numerous anomalies, points where Earth's magnetic field shows unexpected variations. Some anomalies are explained by iron-rich rock formations or volcanic intrusions. Others lack clear geological explanations. The most intriguing anomalies are those with regular geometric patterns, formations that repeat at intervals suggesting design rather than chance. Could these be mapping signatures of buried structures, buildings, or installations constructed from magnetic materials? The patterns are there in the data, waiting for interpretation that official channels seem reluctant to provide. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed what appear to be artificial features beneath the ice. Long straight formations too linear to be natural geology. Right angles where rock formations should be irregular. Rectangular shapes suggesting walls or foundations. These features are documented in scientific literature but rarely discussed in terms of artificial origin. Researchers note them as interesting anomalies while defaulting to natural explanations even when those explanations feel strained. The taboo against suggesting ancient Antarctic civilizations is strong enough that scientists risk careers by speculating openly. Some of the most provocative claims come from whistleblowers and individuals claiming insider knowledge. Former military personnel have described seeing classified imagery showing structures beneath Antarctic ice. Scientists involved in survey projects have hinted at discoveries they cannot discuss publicly. These testimonies are difficult to verify and easily dismissed as attention-seeking or misinterpretation. But the consistency of accounts describing geometric anomalies, suppressed findings, and official pressure to remain silent creates a pattern that demands consideration. The ice remembers what these witnesses claim, even if proof remains elusive. Could there be entire cities beneath Antarctic ice? If a civilization existed during an ice-free period and was then buried by advancing glaciers, their structures would be preserved in the cold like mammoths in permafrost. Buildings made of stone would survive millennia under ice. If those buildings were constructed in valleys now filled with ice, they would appear on ground-penetrating radar as anomalous formations, geometric shapes amid chaotic natural geology. The ice would have protected them, keeping them frozen in time while the surface world forgot they ever existed. Accessing these potential sites would require massive excavation efforts. Drilling through miles of ice is expensive and technically challenging. Even if structures are confirmed, reaching them would be a monumental undertaking requiring international cooperation and resources that few governments would commit without compelling reasons. The Antarctic Treaty complicates matters further by restricting certain activities and requiring environmental impact assessments. Any expedition seeking to excavate ancient ruins would face legal and logistical hurdles that might prove insurmountable. The ice protects its secrets through sheer weight and isolation. Yet the potential rewards would be extraordinary. If artificial structures exist beneath Antarctic ice, they would rewrite human history. They would prove that advanced civilizations existed far earlier than currently accepted. They would provide physical evidence for theories that remain speculative, validating researchers who have argued for decades that mainstream chronology is incomplete. The knowledge and technology preserved in such sites could include information about the civilization that built them, about the catastrophe that destroyed them, about capabilities we have yet to rediscover. The ice remembers all of this, waiting. The features detected by radar and magnetic surveys are real, documented in scientific data even if their interpretation remains contentious. Whether those features are natural or artificial, whether they represent ancient construction or mere geological coincidence, can only be determined through direct investigation that has not yet occurred. Until then, what lies beneath remains one of Antarctica's deepest mysteries. The subglacial world is vast, largely unexplored, and full of surprises. Each new survey reveals more complexity, more anomalies, more questions. The ice holds secrets that technology glimpses but cannot yet fully reveal, and the next chapter examines why access to those secrets is so carefully controlled. On December 1st, 1961, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, establishing the continent as a scientific preserve dedicated to peaceful research. The treaty banned military activities, prohibited nuclear testing, suspended territorial claims, and established environmental protection protocols. On the surface, it represents enlightened international cooperation, a rare example of nations setting aside geopolitical competition for the common good. But the treaty also created a framework that restricts access, limits certain activities, and ensures that powerful nations maintain control over Antarctic operations. The ice remembers what motivated this unusual agreement. The timing of the treaty is interesting. It came during the height of the Cold War when U.S.-Soviet cooperation was rare and trust was minimal. Yet both superpowers agreed to Antarctic demilitarization and signed a binding agreement. What motivated this unusual cooperation? The official explanation emphasizes scientific interests and environmental protection. Both are legitimate concerns. But could there have been other motivations? Did the nations involved share intelligence about Antarctic discoveries that made them mutually interested in controlling access and managing information? The silence around certain aspects suggests deeper reasons. The treaty established Antarctica as off-limits for resource extraction. Mining is prohibited. Oil drilling is banned. This protects the pristine environment and prevents conflicts over resource claims. But it also means that if valuable resources exist beneath the ice, whether mineral deposits or something more exotic, they remain untouched and largely unstudied. If ancient technology or artifacts exist in Antarctica, the treaty effectively puts them in a protected vault accessible only to approved scientific missions operating under strict guidelines. Control masquerades as protection. Article 7 of the treaty allows for inspections to verify compliance with treaty provisions. Observers from signatory nations can inspect any installation or facility. This promotes transparency and prevents secret military buildups. But it also means that independent exploration is nearly impossible. Private expeditions require permits and oversight. Amateur researchers or alternative historians cannot simply travel to Antarctica and investigate anomalies they find intriguing. The continent is locked behind bureaucratic and logistical barriers that few can navigate. The ice is guarded not just by cold but by law. Why would nations agree to restrict their own access to a continent? One explanation is that unrestricted competition for Antarctic resources could lead to conflict. During the 1950s, multiple nations were claiming overlapping territories. Without an agreement, military confrontation was possible. The treaty forestalled this by freezing all claims and requiring international cooperation. This is sensible policy, but it assumes nations value conflict avoidance over potential discoveries or resources. Another explanation considers what expeditions like Operation Highjump might have found. If American, Soviet, British, or other national expeditions discovered evidence of ancient civilizations or anomalous structures, those discoveries would have strategic implications. The nation controlling such sites might gain access to advanced knowledge or technology. Other nations would demand access or seek to prevent anyone from monopolizing the finds. A treaty ensuring international oversight and restricting unilateral action would prevent any single nation from exploiting Antarctic secrets. The ice remembers what prompted such careful control, even if official narratives emphasize environmental concerns. The treaty has been amended and supplemented over the decades. The Protocol on Environmental Protection, added in 1991, strengthened restrictions on resource extraction and environmental impact. It designated Antarctica as a natural reserve devoted to peace and science. These additions further limit what activities are permitted. They also provide additional rationale for denying permits to researchers whose projects might be deemed potentially harmful or unnecessary. The framework protects Antarctica but also controls who can study it and what they can investigate. Secrecy and classification around Antarctic research is another concern. Military and intelligence agencies from various nations maintain presence in Antarctica. Their activities are nominally scientific and permitted under the treaty. But intelligence gathering and classified research can occur under scientific cover. Data collected during expeditions is not always published. Discoveries can be classified for national security reasons. The public sees only what authorities choose to release, creating an information asymmetry where officials know more than they share. The ice remembers what is concealed. There have been incidents suggesting that not all Antarctic activities are transparent. In 2001, a private expedition reported unusual radar returns suggesting large voids beneath the ice in Queen Maud Land. When they attempted to organize a follow-up expedition to investigate, permits were denied on environmental grounds. In 2004, satellite imagery showed what appeared to be a large-scale excavation project near Lake Vostok. Official explanations described ice core drilling operations, but the scale seemed disproportionate to stated research goals. These incidents fuel suspicion that activities beyond public knowledge occur in Antarctica. Whistleblower testimonies add to concerns. Individuals claiming to have worked on classified Antarctic projects have described underground facilities, suppressed archaeological discoveries, and international agreements to keep certain findings secret. These testimonies are difficult to verify and often come from sources whose credibility is uncertain. But the consistency of themes across multiple accounts creates a pattern that cannot be dismissed entirely without investigation. The ice remembers what these witnesses claim, and silence from official channels neither confirms nor denies their accounts. The Antarctic Treaty expires in 2048 unless renewed. As that date approaches, questions about what happens next are emerging. Will nations recommit to international cooperation and environmental protection? Or will economic pressures and strategic interests lead to renegotiation that opens Antarctica to resource extraction and increased competition? If the treaty dissolves, will long-suppressed information about Antarctic discoveries be released? Or will new agreements maintain existing secrecy? The ice waits patiently while humanity decides its fate. The ice remembers what the treaty protects and what it conceals. Whether that protection serves humanity's interests or serves to keep uncomfortable truths buried depends on what actually exists beneath the ice and why access is so carefully controlled. The treaty is a mechanism. How that mechanism is used, whether to safeguard a pristine wilderness or to monopolize ancient secrets, determines whether it serves noble purposes or becomes an instrument of suppression. Until Antarctica's mysteries are fully disclosed and investigated transparently, the treaty will remain subject to both praise and suspicion, reflecting the ambiguity that surrounds the frozen continent itself. Over the decades, researchers, military personnel, and support staff who have worked in Antarctica have occasionally spoken about experiences that do not align with official narratives. These testimonies vary in credibility and specificity, but they form a pattern suggesting that unusual discoveries and encounters occur more frequently than public records indicate. Whether these accounts reflect genuine phenomena, misinterpretations of natural conditions, or deliberate fabrications remains contested, but they deserve examination as part of Antarctica's broader mystery. The ice remembers what these voices describe, even if proof remains elusive. A former Navy pilot who participated in Antarctic operations during the 1970s described flying over an area where instruments malfunctioned inexplicably. Compasses spun wildly. Altimeters gave impossible readings. Radio communications were disrupted by interference that defied technical explanation. The pilot reported the incidents upon return to base and was told the phenomena were known but classified. He was instructed not to discuss them and warned that speculation could damage his career. Decades later, after retirement, he spoke publicly but offered no evidence beyond personal testimony. A geologist working on an ice core project in the 1980s claimed his team discovered organic material in ice layers dated to a period when Antarctica should have been fully glaciated. The material included wood fragments and what appeared to be worked stone, objects suggesting human activity. The geologist said samples were confiscated by military personnel who arrived unexpectedly at the research station. The team was debriefed and required to sign non-disclosure agreements. Official reports of the expedition made no mention of unusual finds, and the samples disappeared into classified channels. A construction worker who helped build facilities at McMurdo Station in the 1990s described encountering a restricted area within the base perimeter. The area was guarded and off-limits even to personnel with standard security clearances. Workers who asked about the restricted zone were told it housed sensitive communications equipment. But the worker noticed that supplies delivered to the restricted area included archaeological equipment, ground-penetrating radar systems, and crates marked with symbols he did not recognize. He concluded that activities beyond routine communications were occurring but had no way to confirm his suspicions. Satellite imagery analysts who have worked with Antarctic data describe instances where images were edited or withheld from public release. Features visible in preliminary imagery sometimes disappeared in final published versions. When analysts asked about discrepancies, they were told corrections were made for image quality or that features were classified for security reasons. Some analysts concluded that certain discoveries were being systematically concealed, though direct evidence of what was being hidden remained elusive. The pattern of gaps and edits speaks louder than official explanations. Scientists involved in subglacial lake research have mentioned pressure to avoid speculating about anomalous findings. Data showing unexpected thermal signatures or magnetic anomalies was publishable only with conventional explanations attached. Suggestions that features might be artificial or require further investigation to determine origin were discouraged. Career advancement favored those who did not challenge established narratives. The result was self-censorship, where researchers learned to frame findings in ways that did not invite controversy. The ice remembers what is not said as much as what is spoken. Indigenous peoples from regions near Antarctica have their own stories. Polynesian navigators speak of ancestors who traveled far south and returned with tales of lands beyond the ice. Australian Aboriginal traditions include references to southern realms inhabited by beings of great knowledge. These stories, passed through oral tradition, are often dismissed as mythology by Western academics. But they form part of a broader pattern of memory suggesting that Antarctica has been known, visited, and perhaps inhabited at various points in human history. The ice remembers connections across cultures and time. Expedition members from various national programs have reported strange lights in the sky, unexplained sounds emanating from beneath the ice, and equipment failures in specific locations that recur despite technical fixes. These phenomena might have conventional explanations. Auroras create unusual lights. Ice shifting produces sounds. Equipment fails under extreme conditions. But the clustering of reports in certain areas and the consistency of descriptions across independent observers suggest that some locations have characteristics not yet understood or publicly acknowledged. The ice remembers where anomalies concentrate. Retired military officers have hinted at classified operations beyond official Antarctic activities. Bases built beneath ice using advanced tunneling technology. Research into exotic energy sources. Recovery operations for objects of unknown origin. These hints are never accompanied by verifiable evidence, leaving them in the realm of rumor and speculation. Yet the persistence of such claims across decades and across multiple national programs creates a pattern that is difficult to ignore even if impossible to prove. The ice remembers operations that official histories omit, operations that leave traces in whispered accounts and redacted documents. The challenge with testimonial evidence is verification. Personal accounts can be honest but mistaken. Memory is fallible. Interpretation is subjective. Without physical evidence, documents, or corroboration, testimonies remain anecdotal. Yet when multiple witnesses describe similar phenomena independently, when patterns emerge across different times and locations, when career risks accompany disclosure, the testimonies gain weight even if they fall short of proof. The ice remembers what these voices claim, and the consistency of their accounts demands consideration even without definitive confirmation. What would it take for these voices to be heard and investigated properly? Declassification of relevant documents would help. Transparency from national Antarctic programs would allow verification of claims. Independent investigations with access to restricted areas could confirm or refute testimonies. But these measures require institutional will to seek truth even if that truth disrupts comfortable narratives. Until such will emerges, the voices from the ice will continue to whisper at the margins, telling stories that official channels ignore. The ice waits with the patience of ages for disclosure or discovery. The pattern of testimony from Antarctic workers and researchers reveals consistent themes. Instrument malfunctions in specific areas. Discovery of anomalous materials. Official confiscation and classification. Pressure to remain silent. These themes appear across different decades, different national programs, different types of personnel. The consistency suggests either coordinated fabrication, which seems implausible given witness independence, or genuine experiences that authorities prefer to keep quiet. The ice remembers what these witnesses experienced, and their voices form part of a larger mystery about what Antarctica truly holds and why powerful forces work so diligently to control information about it. We have journeyed through impossible maps and ancient geology, through catastrophe and legend, through military expeditions and modern anomalies. We have examined evidence both compelling and contested, testimonies both credible and questionable. Antarctica emerges from this investigation not as a simple frozen wilderness, but as a repository of mysteries that challenge our understanding of history, civilization, and perhaps humanity's place in a larger cosmic story. What can we conclude from this evidence? What questions remain? The ice remembers everything we have explored, holding answers that remain tantalizingly out of reach. The maps are real. The Piri Reis and Orontius Phineas maps exist. They depict Antarctic coastlines with accuracy that conventional history struggles to explain. Whether they prove ancient, advanced civilizations or represent remarkable coincidences, they demand attention and resist easy dismissal. The geology is documented. Antarctica was once temperate, supporting forests and life. The timeline for ice coverage is debated, but windows of habitability in recent millennia cannot be ruled out completely. The ice remembers warmth, and that memory is encoded in rock and sediment. The catastrophe is evidenced. Flash frozen mammoths, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, rapid climate shifts recorded in ice cores and sediment layers all point to dramatic events that transformed Earth at the end of the last ice age. If Antarctica was inhabited during a warm period, any civilization there would have faced annihilation when the ice returned. The legends are widespread. From Plato to Polynesia, from Australia to South America, stories speak of southern lands, advanced ancestors, and cataclysmic floods. These myths may be independent creations, or they may preserve memories of real events. The expeditions raise questions. Why did Nazi Germany invest heavily in Antarctic exploration in 1938? Why did the United States respond with Operation Highjump, the largest polar expedition ever mounted, only to terminate it abruptly? What did Admiral Byrd mean by his statements about new enemies and polar threats? The classified nature of much expedition data prevents definitive answers but suggests discoveries that were deemed sensitive. The ice remembers what those expeditions found, even if official records tell only partial truths. The structures remain unconfirmed but provocative. Pyramid-shaped peaks visible in satellite imagery, geometric anomalies detected by ground-penetrating radar, magnetic signatures suggesting metallic objects beneath ice. These features could be natural, could be imaging artifacts, or could be evidence of ancient construction. Without direct investigation, we cannot know with certainty, and direct investigation is restricted by treaty and access limitations. The ice holds evidence that technology glimpses but cannot yet confirm, leaving us with tantalizing possibilities rather than definitive proof. The subglacial discoveries are tantalizing. Lake Vostok and hundreds of other hidden lakes, microbial life in extreme environments, thermal anomalies suggesting unusual heat sources. The Russian drilling halt and subsequent secrecy raise suspicions that something significant was found. What lies beneath the ice in these hidden water systems? What might geothermal caverns harbor? The ice remembers what drilling operations encountered, but official silence leaves more questions than answers. The treaty creates both protection and control. It prevents military conflict and environmental destruction, admirable goals. But it also restricts independent investigation, concentrates knowledge among official programs, and provides cover for classification and secrecy. Whether the treaty serves humanity's best interests or conceals truths that should be public depends on what actually exists beneath the ice and why access is so carefully managed. The ice remembers the motivations behind international cooperation, motivations that may extend beyond environmental protection. The testimonies are fragmentary but consistent. Researchers, military personnel, and others who have worked in Antarctica describe anomalies, suppressed findings, and pressure to remain silent. While individual accounts may be questionable, the pattern across multiple witnesses and decades suggests that official narratives are incomplete. What are these witnesses trying to tell us? What have they seen that authorities prefer kept quiet? The ice remembers their experiences even if proof remains inaccessible, and their voices point toward mysteries that demand investigation. So what lies beneath Antarctica's ice? We cannot say with certainty. The evidence points toward possibilities without confirming them. A lost civilization buried by catastrophic climate change remains plausible if unproven. Ancient structures waiting beneath miles of ice remain possible if unverified. Technologies and knowledge from a forgotten age remain within the realm of speculation if not yet demonstrated. What we can say is that Antarctica holds secrets, that those secrets have been inadequately investigated, and that forces exist which prefer those secrets remain hidden. The ice knows but does not speak freely. Why does this matter? If Antarctica harbors evidence of advanced ancient civilizations, it would fundamentally alter our understanding of human history. It would prove that civilization is older than we have been taught, that human capabilities have been underestimated, that rises and falls of empires span timescales we have not acknowledged. It would suggest that knowledge has been lost and can be rediscovered, that the past holds lessons for the present and future. The ice remembers a history more complex than our textbooks admit, and recovering that history could transform our understanding of who we are. If structures and artifacts exist beneath the ice, they might contain information about the civilization that created them, about the catastrophe that destroyed them, about technologies and sciences we have yet to relearn. Accessing that information could accelerate human development, could provide solutions to current challenges, could expand our understanding of what is possible. Or it could reveal uncomfortable truths about humanity's cyclical nature, about the fragility of civilization, about forces and entities we are not prepared to confront. The ice holds both promise and warning, knowledge that could elevate or humble us. The ice remembers. It holds in frozen silence the answers to questions we have barely learned to ask. Whether those answers will emerge depends on choices humanity makes. Will we demand transparency and investigation? Will we challenge the narratives we have been taught? Will we accept that history might be stranger and older than conventional wisdom suggests? Or will we remain content with partial truths, with mysteries unsolved, with secrets buried beneath ice and time? Antarctica waits, frozen and patient, holding secrets that could change everything. The ice remembers what we have forgotten, and perhaps the time has come for us to remember as well, to reclaim knowledge that was lost or hidden, to face truths about our past that challenge our present and shape our future. If this journey through Antarctica's mysteries has intrigued you, please like this video and subscribe to Whispered Empires for more explorations of history's hidden chapters. Leave a comment telling me which aspect of the Antarctic mystery fascinates you most. Is it the impossible maps, the Nazi expeditions, Operation Highjump, the pyramid anomalies, Lake Vostok, or something else entirely? Use the keyword ice remembers in your comment if you believe Antarctica holds secrets about humanity's forgotten past. Your engagement helps us continue uncovering the stories that mainstream narratives overlook. Until next time, sleep well and let the mysteries of the ancients guide your dreams into deeper questions about who we are and where we truly come from. The ice remembers, and perhaps through these investigations, we too can begin to remember what time and silence have tried to erase.